Well, welcome back to another episode of the Make Disciples podcast. My name is Dan Rober, and joining me in our brand new podcast studio today is Russell Matherly. Russell, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Glad to be back.
And we say it's new, but it's actually really new because we have all the tchotchkes behind us. And to be clear, I have no eye for this whatsoever, so this all goes to our brilliant designer, Melanie Knight. Want to call her out because she did all of this for us, and we think it looks great. It's a nice little setup here we get to play with.
I like that there are birds all around. That's nice. It comforts me in the interview to have birds.
Good birds.
Love the birds.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about stories, and we're hearing stories of the senior staff here at Wildwood. And so, Russell, you get to tell us a little bit of your story. So let's start with the basics. What is your title here at Wildwood? How long have you been here, and what do you do here?
I am the director of worship, and I have been here for just over 5 years. Yes, we got here in summer of 2019, in June of 2019. So we're just a little ways over the threshold of 5 years here at Wildwood. And oh gosh, to ask what does a worship director do on any given day? In general, it's, all the stuff that happens in, I'm pointing to that room over there, in the sanctuary on Sunday mornings, planning, scheduling, organizing, then, doing the Sunday morning worship gathering here at Wildwood. So kind of getting everything together, that coordinating all the bits and pieces and people and all that kind of stuff. And yeah.
Yeah. And that's summarized under one of our mission strategies, to move hearts.
That's
that
right.
whole effective idea of changing our affections and focusing our hopes.
That's right. And the way that we talk about moving hearts within worship ministry is we like to think of what we're doing as kind of setting the table for that to happen, because we all know that God is the one who changes the heart.
Yeah.
And that's true of us in our conversion into Christianity, but also then after that, continuing to be formed more and more and more into his image. So what we're doing is not necessarily being the ones who do the changing, as if that were even possible. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. But to kind of create an environment that fosters attention and contemplation and worship and that kind of an experience, in the hopes that that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah. So let's hear a little bit more about you, in particular, your own faith story. So what led you to Christ?
I was thinking about that, and to be honest, one of the best gifts that I believe my parents gave to my brother, my sister, and myself is we were raised in the church. So I can't remember any extended period of time in my life that I wasn't regularly in corporate worship or with God's people in some capacity.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, for whatever reason, it was just very, like our whole week was planned around, if Sunday's coming, you're going to church. And it wasn't, it was never like, I don't know, forced necessarily. It's just what we did.
It was assumed.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. It was just kind of the norm. Except for the Sunday after prom, for some reason. That was, or if we were sick, but it was always like, hey, prom's coming up Saturday night, which means you don't have to go to church on Sunday, which I thought was, I don't know, kind of arbitrary. But anyways, that was just the norm. Just grew up going to church on a week in, week out basis. And so to be honest, there's any number of times in my life that could have been the first moment of faith. I'm not entirely sure, which again, I kind of consider to be a gift, but some potential candidates anyways. I was baptized when I was in second grade, and I don't remember a whole lot. My dad remembers much more about that than I do. I remember being there. I remember being in the water, and I was like, this is kind of cool. But I couldn't really, I was in second grade. I wasn't terribly articulate. So I couldn't really tell you like what was happening in that moment. But my dad has told me this before, that there was something in a sermon one time that stuck out to me, and we went after and we talked to the pastor. I remember going into his office. I don't remember what was said. I don't remember what we talked about. I don't know. And then after that, it was just confirmed that I was going to be baptized. And then I was baptized a couple of weeks later. I can't remember now. But I do remember at that time in my second grade brain thinking that for some reason, even though I couldn't really articulate it, for some reason, things are going to be different from now on. And I couldn't like put my finger on exactly what that was or what that meant, but there was kind of just this assumption in my second grade brain that, okay, because of this, my life should be different. So fast forward for a couple of years, and in 2000, let's see, this was summer of 2007, so summer before 8th grade, I was at I'm a younger millennial Christian, so of course this is a faith experience at a retreat, most of which happened at the beach. And so I was just fresh off of 7th grade, and I'm in this teeny tiny little room at the beach that is just full of 100, 150 hot, sweaty, sunscreen laden, like sunburned to a crisp within like an inch of our lives, middle and high school students, which sounds like a nightmare now. Like that sounds awful. That is the last place you would expect to encounter the divine. But we were all in this room together, and we were singing these songs. The band was really good. Kind of developed my love for music from a lot of those guys. But we were in this room, and I just remember having this experience in there that was, I don't know how else to describe it, other than it was just transcendent. And it was another kind of mile marker in my life where I said, because of this moment, everything's going to be different. And, a lot of people kind of talk about moments like that, where you're in a room, you're singing these songs, people are crying, and again, it was sweaty and gross and all that stuff. And, some people write that off as kind of just being, well, it was just sort of like an emotional high or whatever. And I'm not saying that emotions weren't a part of it. Of course they were. We're humans. We're emotional beings. But for someone just to say, well, that was just an emotional high that you were riding, I don't buy it. Because there was something happening in that moment that was just, it was holy, it was different, it was other. There was something, it wasn't just the emotional high itself, it was what was happening underneath that moment.
Yeah.
That was really powerful and gripping and transformative for me. And I wasn't the only other person in the room who tasted and saw something that night that changed them. And, it's a little bit like, even as I'm talking about it now, it's almost like describing like falling in love, which is like, there's another person and you feel like you're going to be sick and you feel like you're going to explode and you feel like heat on the back of your neck or whatever. Which on the surface, like, that does not sound fun. But when you're actually in that experience, when you're going through that, when you're falling in love with someone, it's just this beautiful, transcendent, there's something, yes, it is like an emotional, physiological, bodily experience, but there's something more real happening underneath that.
Yeah.
And I just remember being in that room, and again, I wasn't the most, eloquent, well-spoken post 7th grader in the world, but there was something in that moment that I thought, I want this forever. And I will give away, I will sell, I will give up whatever it takes to have this. And not just that emotional moment, but again, the reality that was happening underneath that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, we have examples in 18th and 19th century Christianity of this phrase of your heart being strangely warmed. And it's hard to put into words, but it's how God is moving in people's lives in some undescribable yet clear way.
Well, and absolutely. And not just that, but it's also served for me as, I'm sure there are tons of people watching and listening who can relate to this. In my life as a Christian, as I'm sure we all have to some degree, I've gone through tremendous seasons and times of darkness and doubt.
Yeah.
And even in moments where I thought intellectually, I want to scrap this thing altogether. I just can't keep going. There's something in my heart that anchors me back to that moment and says, you could talk about your brain all day long, but something happened then that you can't explain.
Yeah.
So you can, rant and rave and rail against it, and I have. I've had times like that. But there's always something about that moment that acts as like a gravitational center that I can't deny it, and I just can't get away from it.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit from there. What brought you into ministry? What drew you into doing this full time?
What's funny is it was actually that exact same moment. For whatever reason, I've grown up around music. My mom sang in the church choir. I've grown up around church music, and just always found it, I hate to keep using the same word, but just transcendent, that you get people in a room together, many of whom are strangers to each other, even people who don't like each other, in the same room, and you sing these particular songs in such a way that these people who have nothing to do with each other, who might not even know each other, might be from totally different walks of life, are both having visceral, emotional, bodily, spiritual reactions to this music. And I remember seeing that, right out of 7th grade at that camp, and seeing this happen around me, and just seeing the sort of mystery that music has. And again, I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't quantify it or whatever, but I just said, there's something here that I want to chase after, that I want to pull at for the rest of my life and figure out. And I didn't know you could, I didn't know you could have a career in that. I knew some people did, but I didn't know that you could, have a 9-to-5 that was structured around that sort of thing. And I just, part of it, Dan, honestly, is I wasn't good at too much else. So academics, sports, that sort of thing was just never quite my cup of tea. But having that fascination in that moment in middle school, and then just having a community of wise, discerning people who kind of pulled that gift out of me and said, there's something to this. I think that you have a gift in this way. And that's not like a pride thing or an arrogance thing. That's something that God has put within you to give away to others. And I really don't think I would be where I am right now if it weren't for those mentors along the way who helped mold me and equipped me to approach music as a ministry. And then I found out that you could do that professionally. And I thought, that's the one.
What I love about that is that's the model of the church. People encouraging and spurring one another on towards whatever it was. And for you, it was spurring on towards doing this full time.
Right.
Yeah. It's so good. And I love hearing your story. I love hearing all of these stories because we obviously know each other. We work together, but we don't necessarily know one another's stories. So it's exciting to hear those. And we want to hear your stories as well. We want to hear how God is moving and working and healing in your lives as well. We'd love to hear it. Maybe it's about your salvation or something that happened yesterday. You can share your story with us by going to wildwoodtlh.com/stories. And there's a short form that you can fill out there that we'd love to hear about and maybe even share with the rest of our congregation as well. So Russell, thanks for being with us for this episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dan.
And I hope you'll join us for another episode of the Make Disciples podcast.